There's a very strange place where people are making the worst decision of the day. It's not usually in the boardroom, and it's not usually in a courtroom. It's not some dramatic moment where the spotlight is shining on you and everybody is watching and waiting. It's usually in private, like times in the driveway. Imagine this scenario. A man arrives home from work, he turns off the car, sits in the driveway where it's quiet. His family, his life, his responsibilities are all on the other side of the door. And instead of going in right away, he just sits there. Not because he's planning anything, he just needs a minute. And maybe he does. But then 1 minute drags into 8 minutes. And 8 minutes becomes 20. And he's sitting in his driver's seat, looking at his phone, pretending to answer emails. He's pretending to be a productive citizen when all he's doing is just avoiding going through that door. And the funny thing is, he knows, and that's the uncomfortable part. He knows that maybe hard conversations are waiting for him on the other side of the door. Maybe chaos awaits. He knows his spouse has been trying to get his attention for weeks. He knows one of his kids needs him. He knows his body is tired and weak because he's treated it like a rental car over the last 10 years, and he's made promises to change, but then not followed through on those promises. He knows there's a decision that needs to be made in his business, but he's deferred making a decision because he doesn't want to deal with the discomfort of being more structured. He knows that there's a character issue, a relationship issue, or a health issue that's not going to go away. But for that 10-15 minutes of alone time in his driveway, he gets to exist in a little magical place where no decisions are necessary. It's the kingdom of one more minute. And I think most of us, if we were honest with ourselves, have known what that kingdom looks like. Some people find it in the driveway. Some people find it lying awake, being unable to go back to sleep. Some people find it doom scrolling on social media. Some people find it in work, which is one of the most respectable hiding places ever conceived. And that is the genius of being busy. It lets you avoid your life while looking responsible to everybody else. You can become completely unaccountable in the most socially impressive way. You can answer every email and avoid every truth. You could be admired by strangers and unavailable to the people who need you most. You can build a reputation while quietly negotiating away your character. And this is why most people don't have a decision problem. They have a consequence problem. Most people aren't as confused as they pretend to be. They may not know every detail, and they may not know exactly how difficult the path before them may be. But most people know the direction. They know what is decaying in their life. They know what is being avoided, and they know what they're explaining away. The problem is that they don't know. The problem is knowing creates an obligation to act. And that obligation weighs heavy. And once you face and admit the truth, then the truth can no longer remain being vague. You can no longer hide inside complexity and saying, I'm just trying to figure it out. When most people say that, what they're really saying is, I'm trying to find a version of the right decision that helps me avoid the pain of discipline, or at the very least, costs me the least discomfort. That is what most of us are looking for. We want transformation without sacrifice, maturity without discomfort, and health without discipline. We want marriage without humility, and wealth without restraint. We want leadership without responsibility, and a fear of being both the leader and the led. We all want for a better life, but we all want our old self not to die in the process. And that is a bargain with success that never works, because the future does not accept unpaid invoices. And those things that we're trying to avoid simply do not disappear because we forget them or neglect them. Those things patiently wait in the dark and gathers gravity. It compounds and it returns not as a decision, but as a condition. And that is one of the great tragedies of avoidance. A decision you did not make eventually becomes a life you did not want to build. That man in the driveway did not one day decide to become distant from his family. It was built. He chose it slowly by avoiding one conversation after another. He did it by convincing himself that being tired is the same thing as being absent. He did it by telling himself that providing is the same thing as leading. He did it by saying, I'll deal with it when things calm down, not realizing that things never calm down for people who refuse to create order. Then one day he looks around and wonders why the house feels a little colder. The answer isn't mysterious. He built it. Not all at once, but brick by brick, avoidance by avoidance. The same thing happens in health. Nobody destroys their health by one meal, although that would be almost morbidly impressive. Nobody eats one donut and immediately becomes a cautionary tale. It's actually way more pathetic than that. It's in the ordinary details. It's in the repeated little vote of comfort over consequence, day after day, week after week, year after year. It's the compound effect of the snack we didn't need, the workout we might have skipped for multiple days in a row, or the doom scrolling that we chose over productivity, the drink that you had just to take off the edge, as if the edge was the problem and not the fact that you couldn't sit alone by yourself for 5 minutes. And then people say, I don't know what happened, but they do. What happened was their body kept score while their mind made excuses. And that is the brutal thing about consequences. They are not impressed by your explanations or justifications. We can have a beautifully crafted explanation or reason or excuse. We can plead for empathy. We can have a reason so strong enough that everybody nods their head and says, that makes sense. But reality doesn't care. It is not moved by the emotional quality of your excuse. Reality only asks one question. What did you repeatedly choose? And that's the story that Will Durant says in his book, The Story of Philosophy, which was, we are what we repeatedly do. Excellence is not an act, it is a habit. And I think it's important to note, it's not what we repeatedly think about. It's not what we repeatedly believe. It's only embedded by our actions, not our thoughts. And to question, if we really believed, would we have the faith to act? After all, faith without works is dead. And that's where life becomes very uncomfortable for modern society, because we have become very good at decorating our decisions with moral language. We do this in our personal life, and we do it politically. A person will say, I'm just being kind to myself, but what they're really saying is, I'm avoiding discipline. They will say, I'm protecting my peace, but what they're really saying is, I'm avoiding necessary confrontation. They'll say, I'm following my truth, but what they're really saying is, I found a sentence that helps me avoid responsibility. And in politics, we judge decisions by the warmth of their intention rather than by the reality of their consequences. We hear a politician say something, and we tell ourselves, that sounds compassionate. And we stop the analysis there because we feel that somehow we become more compassionate because we've announced it. But a serious person cannot merely stop at intention. A serious person has to ask, what does this produce? Who pays for it? Who does it punish? Who does it reward? Who does it incentivize? What happens when imperfect people respond to the system in the same way that imperfect people have always responded? This is not just some cynicism. This is adulthood. Because a decision isn't good just at merely thinking or saying that it feels altruistic. A decision has to be judged by the world it creates after the emotion of deciding it has passed. It's true in politics, it's true in business, it's true in your family and relationships, and it's true in your health. You do not get to say, I meant well, by refusing to examine the results of the choices you made. Intentions matter, but consequences are the receipt. And sooner or later, everybody has to pay. That's why the question, what is easy right now, is very impractical. It's dangerous. It feels innocent. And of course, nothing is always difficult. Some things are easy. And certainly there is no virtue in making your life incessantly and constantly miserable. But some people turn difficulty into an identity. They think that suffering automatically equates to wisdom. But it doesn't. Sometimes suffering just means you're disorganized. But the problem is not whether something is easy. The problem is when easy becomes a virtue or a priority. And when ease becomes the priority, everything else becomes negotiable. And that includes your health, your relationships, your finances. Every part of your life becomes negotiable. And the strange thing about ease is that people can negotiate away everything that's important while still feeling that they're reasonable. And that is the black comedy. We rarely destroy ourselves by speeches made by villains. We destroy ourselves with reasonable expectations, such as, it's not the right time. I'm too tired. I need to think about it. I just need to be realistic. I deserve this. I'll start on Monday. And this is where Carl Jung's idea of the shadow becomes useful, not as some academic concept, but as in reality. The shadow is not simply the monster inside you. That's too simplistic. It's the part of you that knows the truth before your public personality is willing to admit it. It's the part of you that notices your cowardice. It's the part of you that knows your resentment. It's the part of you that knows that your generosity is really approval seeking. It's the part of you that knows your responsibilities are being avoided. It's the part of you that knows that you're using intelligence not to discover the truth, but to hide it. And if you don't consciously confront that part of yourself, it becomes harmful over time. And it starts to ruin your life from underground. That anger you do not examine becomes sarcasm. The fear you do not face becomes control. The insecurity you don't admit becomes arrogance. The responsibility you do not accept becomes blame. The truth you don't speak becomes resentment. And that's why avoidance is never passive. Avoidance creates a personality adopted for evasion. And that personality can be, quite honestly, quite sophisticated. It could have a nice job, it could read nice books, it could have a nice house. It could give advice to other people. It could even make videos on the internet talking to other people about responsibility. And that's the uncomfortable part. Nobody is exempt from this. The question is not whether or not you have a shadow. The question is whether or not you're willing to stop outsourcing your life to it. And maturity requires it. The ability to say, there is something in me that desires the easy path. And if I let that thing rule me, it will ruin all the other parts of my life that I truly care about. Of course, there is something in me all the time that seeks more comfort than truth, to want more approval than courage, to want reward without the price. And if I do not discipline that part of myself, it will start to control me. And that is the real battleground that I'm talking about. What part of me is making the decision for me right now? Is it the part of me that wants comfort and ease? The part that wants me to remain where I am? Or is it the part of me that wants me to be stronger, that can face the future with bravery? Once we see what part of us is making the decision, then the decision-making process changes. Instead of asking ourselves, what do I want? We need to start asking ourselves, what consequences do I want? It's a more honest question because consequences do not flatter you. The consequence doesn't care how you felt when you made the decision. The consequence simply arrives. And that can be very empowering because once you realize your life is being shaped by the decisions you've made repeatedly, then your life can be reshaped by new decisions that you make repeatedly. And that's the hope that I'm trying to empower you with today. Responsibility does not have to be a prison. A lot of people hear the word responsibility and think it's all about guilt. Au contraire, it's a doorway out. Responsibility, in my opinion, means authorship. It means that you're not merely a victim to your appetites, your past, or your relationships. It means that you can overcome your own excuses. It means that you can participate in the shaping of your life moving forward. Not perfectly or without any means of suffering, but meaningfully. And that matters. Because the modern person has been sold a very interesting idea of freedom. Freedom is often presented as the removal of the constraints in your life. No limits, no obligations, no judgment, no sacrifice. But that kind of freedom very quickly dissolves into slavery. Slavery to impulse, to appetite, to mood. Slavery to public approval, or slavery to whatever happens to be easiest in the moment. But real freedom is different. It's the ability to choose a better consequence even when an easier option was available. That is freedom. A man that would tell the truth when a lie would protect his ego is free. A woman who can act with discipline when comfort is available is free. The parent who can set a boundary when avoiding conflict is available is free. A citizen who can understand if an idea works, not merely because it sounds compassionate, is free. A person who can face the future before the future corners them is free. You stop seeing responsibility as something that is restricting your life, and you begin to see responsibility as the thing that allows you to carry freedom, because freedom without responsibility is not freedom, it's a drift. And drifting always has a destination, just not one that we intentionally chose. People usually change when small acts of honesty are repeated enough to become a habit. And that habit eventually turns into a new identity. So maybe that man in the driveway will come home and turn off his phone right away and get past the door. He confronts himself and says, I'm avoiding. That doesn't mean that everything is fixed or that conversations won't be awkward or that chaos won't ensue, but it will start aiming him in a different direction. Because once a person changes direction at an intentional target, then decisions change meaning. The hard conversation in front of them is no longer merely discomfort. It becomes the price of trust. The workout is no longer merely effort. It becomes the price of energy. The budget is no longer a restriction. It becomes the price of having future options. An apology is no longer humiliation. It becomes the price of a repair. And discipline no longer becomes punishment. It becomes the price of freedom. And that's how better decisions are made, not because the price isn't real, but by finally seeing what the price they're paying is purchasing. Most people in reality aren't unwilling to work. They're unwilling to work for something that isn't clear. They are unwilling to work when the sacrifice is vague. They are unwilling to suffer for a future they haven't properly imagined. So they choose comfort, not because it's the better option, but it's because it's the only option they can see. Comfort is immediate and makes an offer to you right now. The future is quieter. It's not screaming in your face. And if you ignore it long enough, that quiet future becomes an impossibility. So the question again is not what is easy, it is what consequence is worth the price to pay. And that one question cuts through an enormous amount of nonsense. It cuts through excuses and fake confusion. It tells us flattering little stories that we can avoid that stops us from changing. So I implore you to ask yourself what consequences are worth it. Not just what decision makes me feel better or more nobler today. Which consequence is worth living with? Because you will live with the consequence you chose or the consequences that you avoided. You will live with the consequences of the habits you decided to repeat. You will also suffer the consequences of standards that you decided to lower. Or with the consequences of the truth that you decided not to face. But you can also live with the consequences of courage. You can live with the consequences of discipline, of repair. And you can live with the consequences of choosing your future before your future chooses you. And that is the moral challenge, to catch yourself in these decision-making problems sooner, to reduce the distance between knowing and acting. So do the work, not because it's easy, but because the consequences are worth it. If you found this video to be helpful in your journey of philosophy, financial literacy, economics, politics, and history, make sure you subscribe, like, and hit that notification bell for upcoming videos.